Good evening and welcome to Solutionary TV. Again, I am your host, Dr. Tatiana. Our purpose is always to bring you education that is pertinent to the global issues that are outside the mainstream narrative and present guests that are involved in solutionary innovations, practices, and inventive strategies for our transitioning society. We have a very special guest this evening. She is Zoe Weil. Let me tell you a little bit about Zoe. Zoe is the co-founder and the president for the Institute for Humane Education, where she's created the first graduate programs in comprehensive humane education linking human rights, environmental preservation, and animal protection offered online through an affiliation with Valparaiso University. IHE also offers solutionary-focused programs and workshops for teachers, students, parents, and change agents, as well as an award-winning resource center. Zoe has given six TED Talks, and she has included in her TED Talks, The World Becomes What You Teach, one of my all-time favorites. She's the author of 7 books, which include The World Becomes What We Teach, Educating Generations of Solutionaries, and the Nautilus Silver Medal winner of Most Good, Least Harm. Welcome, Zoe. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Tatiana. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about this little solutionary piece. I think that it's going to be fun for everyone. We'll just start off with this. When we think about what the world needs now and everything about your message, you're a very elegant speaker. You deliver beautifully and you speak about things that really talk to the heart and the soul of what society is looking to change. Tell us a little bit how the concept of solutionaries showed up for you, which I know had an influence very much in that resonating as a title for our show.
So our former executive director came up with this word a number of years ago. And I remember when he said it and I thought, that's it. That's the word. Mm-hmm. That's the word that will really describe where it is we need to move, how it is that we need to approach the challenges that we face in the world. We have such a tendency to take sides and to argue every issue in an either or way instead of thinking about all of the complex systems that create the problems to begin with, and then having people work together to come up with solutions. So we use this word to describe what we're trying to do in education, which is to educate, as you said, generations of solutionaries. So young people will grow up without this either or mindset, without this fighting mindset, but rather with a mindset of, well, I have the skills, the research skills, the critical thinking skills, the strategic thinking skills, the systems thinking skills, and the creativity to solve these problems together with my peers and my mentors and people across the globe. We can do this together.
Wow. And that sounds so fabulous, because really what you're saying is you're teaching them not only to have the skills that very often get drowned out through our various education systems and our societies where we're just kind of expected to accept things hook, line, and sinker. You're also teaching them inclusiveness. You're teaching them to build bridges of communication so that they can see more clearly and be able to align with the values of others so that we get more of a collaborative rather than this adversarial type of relationship in these change agents, correct?
Exactly. And I'm glad that you brought up inclusiveness, because when we think of the term solutionary, so a solutionary isn't just somebody who solves problems. You can be a problem solver without being a solutionary. For us, a solutionary goes deeper. So to come up with a truly solutionary solution, that solution can't harm people, animals, or the environment. It
Right.
has to be that inclusive. And that's an unusual way to think. Usually, when we think about problems, they're siloed. So we have to solve this problem of poverty, or we have to solve this problem of climate change, or we have to solve this problem of um, runoff into the Gulf of Mexico that's causing dead zones. And we don't see all of these things as connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when we seek to solve one problem, for example, when we've sought to solve the problem of hunger, we have created industrialized agricultural systems which are highly polluting. In the case of animal agriculture, they are intensive and incredibly cruel, and in addition to being incredibly polluting and also resource intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not seeing these things as connected. And so when we don't see things as connected, we tend to solve one problem while exacerbating others. But
Yes.
solutionaries don't do that. And teaching young people to be solutionaries is so exciting because when they understand these systemic connections and when they have this mindset and also the habits of both mind and heart. So when
Mm-hmm.
their compassion is cultivated and fostered and what they care about can be nurtured and they can actually work to solve problems that they care about, when all of that comes together and they work collaboratively with others, just incredible things happen.
Oh, absolutely. You can see how that would take place because you actually have a lot of individuals that are passionate about what they are seeing they can contribute rather than dealing with the apathy of I'm just one person, I don't have enough power, I don't know where to start. And you talk about that in your TED Talks. I even want to draw attention to one example you gave was, you were visiting with or running through a drive-through in a car with an individual that had just grabbed something quickly from one of the fast food restaurants, and you had said she'd said to you, Zoe, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I think was exactly what you had
Yeah.
mentioned she'd say. And I know that in the generations outside of the millennials and these rising, youth in our various education systems, a lot of the adults are not apathetic, but they're almost resistant to knowing more because they feel like they have already hit their bandwidth on where they've strategized to stay in alignment with their morals, with their family, or with their religious institutions, or within their political party. Everyone's feeling kind of thin. But you did such a beautiful job of pointing out to educate yourself and to know what is going on with that actually is liberating, isn't it? It liberates them to make better choices. And then if they're willing to look, part of your programs, part of what we're here to do is to actually show the public there really are innovative, boots on the ground, tried and true, demonstratable solutions to eating better, educating better, working with people without having to draw such strong lines between ourselves and them, being more inclusive.
Right. And a part of why I love working with youth and have focused our work on youth. I mean, we educate educators, we've focused on training the trainers, the teachers, and providing professional development for them. But it's really focused on ensuring that young people have the knowledge and the tools and the motivation, of course, to be these solutionaries. And the reason for that is because young people, they haven't um, they haven't gotten stuck in habits yet. They're still
Mm-hmm.
questioning, they're still open
Mm-hmm.
to discovering who they are, what their values really are, and how do they live in alignment. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the more we get entrenched in our habits, the easier it is to say, don't tell me, I don't want to know, because we don't want to change. And nor do we want to live out of alignment
Mm-hmm.
with our values. I mean, it does not feel good to allow your desires to eclipse your values. We all do it. We do it all the time. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really feel good because it's not living with integrity. But when you're young and you haven't, set down those patterns,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to
Mm-hmm.
question and to be open to discovering who you want to be, how you want to behave in the world,
Right.
choices you want.
And when you're addressing youth, I think you've really brought up something beautiful. If you can get them into that critical thinking and that really authentic inquiry at a young age with the kind of enthusiasm that you have attached to the delivery, then they're not going to be as likely to be apathetic or resistant to the information because they realize you're already giving them the tools to think about it before they have made it a habit, right? Before they've gone
Yeah.
down the road of of sourcing a jacket that might have had dog fur on it, and they're horrified to know that they've already bought it. But you give them the chance to maybe, I know that's an extreme example, but it's a common one. What we don't know and that we've already made a habit is a harder thing to get rid of. You're doing them a tremendous favor by giving them the thinking skills before something's become hard and fast in their day to day.
Yes, absolutely. And, I've been a humane educator teaching about the interconnected issues of human rights and animal protection and environmental preservation for a long time, around 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And things are changing in ways that are both incredibly exciting, but also worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you a couple of stories related to that. Um, so a few years ago, I was invited to speak to middle school students at a school in Connecticut. And I was first speaking to the fifth and sixth graders. And I asked them to tell me what they thought were the biggest problems in the world. And on a whiteboard, I wrote down everything they told me until we filled that whiteboard with problems that adults have told me, older students have told me, many, many people have told me the same problems. In one boy, and remember, these are fifth and sixth graders, one boy said sex trafficking. So
Wow.
these kids knew about all these problems. Now, 20, 30 years ago, when I started doing this work, a 10 or 11-year-old was not as acutely aware of all of these challenges in the world. And they did not know about these problems because they were being taught about them in school. They just knew about them because this is their world. They are what's called digital natives. They live in the internet world, so they know a lot more. So I asked them to raise their hands if they could imagine us solving the problems that they'd named. There were 45 kids in that room, and only a handful raised their hands that they
Wow.
could even imagine us solving these problems. Now, I should say that this
Mm-hmm.
particular school was a private school. These were, by and large, privileged kids. And that's important because I could imagine if you listed, these things in the world and you were already disenfranchised and underprivileged, you might say that. But when you have a lot of privileges already and you still don't think these problems can be solved, that's even more worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to change up what I was doing. So I invited the students to close their eyes and I did a guided visualization with them in which I asked them to imagine themselves very old and at the end of a very long life. And I asked them to picture themselves sitting on a park bench on a beautiful day, and the air was clean, and the birds were singing, and the waterways around them were clean, and there hadn't been a war in decades. And nobody went to bed hungry because they had no choice. And that even though it wasn't a perfect world, we had learned to treat each other and other species with respect and compassion. So I painted this picture, and then I invited them to imagine a child coming up and joining them on the park bench. And I told them that the child had been studying history in school and learning about darker times, times they lived through. And then the child asked them all these questions about those times. And then the child asked this final question: what role did you play in helping to bring about this better world? What did you do? So I gave them a few moments to reflect upon that, and then while they still had their eyes closed, I asked them to raise their hands if now they could imagine us solving the problems that they listed on that whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
And this time 40 hands went up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not that hard to restore their hope and to somehow diminish that cynicism and maybe sense of apathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is because these were by and large privileged kids.
Mm-hmm.
So they, that visualization worked and it worked quickly.
Wow.
So fast forward 4 years, and last October I was keynoting a international teachers conference in Guadalajara, Mexico. And the day before the conference began, I was invited to visit the American School of Guadalajara, which is a private school that was hosting this conference. And so a similar demographic. It might have been in Mexico, but these were also privileged kids. And so I was invited to come and visit the fifth graders and then to speak to them. And so I asked those fifth graders, same age, similar demographic, I asked them if they thought we could solve the problems in the world, and every hand went up in the air immediately. What was different? Here's what was different. The teacher in that Mexican school was teaching them in age-appropriate ways about the problems in the world, and they were involved in solving them.
Yeah.
So what's so essential, like we can think that we're trying to protect children by not sharing the challenges that we face, but in fact, they know about them. And if we don't engage them in being solutionaries, in actually making a difference, we are reinforcing their sense of cynicism and hopelessness because they have no experience of real world accomplishment of making a positive difference. And making a positive difference and solving real world problems is not only liberating, it is incredibly gratifying. And it's one of the greatest sources of joy in the world. And so this is another really important reason that we need to do this, because it's not just for the world, it's for these kids.
Sure.
And their future.
Sure, absolutely. And you know, when you think about the reasons why sometimes they can't envision the change or how they could be change agents, we have to realize that not all of them were able to really fully comprehend that it was with every major human evolutionary moment from the industrial age, maybe coming into more of the technology age, that it took those seeing that what we had wasn't enough, or it wasn't sustainable, or it wasn't regenerative, for us to get to that next leg, that next aspect of societal evolution. And a lot of them have believed or been told that they need to respect the organizations and institutions as they are. So there's a little bit of inner conflict, but when you give them permission in an educational opportunity, such as what you have provided in these keynotes, as well as getting in that one-on-one with them, you really allow them to free up their minds and their conscience all at the same time, don't you?
Yes. And I think this gets back to not thinking in either or terms, that we don't have to say, oh, our political and economic and agricultural and production and energy systems, they are the way they are, and we have to get behind them because they're all good. That's that either or thinking. We know that we can constantly work toward perfecting our systems. And so inviting students to be part of that is exciting.
It is. It is. It's tremendous. And I'm going to lead in with the next question. Obviously, your excitement, your passion is contagious, because you knew that it needed to be more than just you in a standalone. Tell us about the Institute for Humane Education and why you founded it.
Sure. Well, so 21 years ago, this is our coming of age year. 21 years ago, I co-founded the Institute, and I had been a humane educator for a number of years, and I had been going into schools and teaching about these issues and watching these kids become change agents when they learned about these different issues. And I thought, you know what? This needs to not be just visiting humane educators going in and delivering free presentations. I worked for a nonprofit organization, and they are the ones who paid my salary and funded these programs. But we needed this to be integrated into the schools. We needed every teacher to be a humane educator, essentially, bringing these issues right into their curriculum. So in 1996, when I co-founded the Institute, it was to do three things. It was to train people to be humane educators, to advance this idea, this concept, this field, and then to bring humane education to students. And for many, many years, we focused on the first two. So we created the first graduate programs in humane education in the United States, and we currently offer three graduate programs: a Master of Education, a Master of Arts, and a graduate certificate program through Valparaiso University, and it's offered online. And then we also have a PhD affiliation with a separate university, Saybrook University. And we actually have our first student graduating with his PhD on Friday, and I'm flying out to California to be there for his graduation.
Phenomenal.
So thanks. So that was a very, our biggest programs were our graduate programs. We also offered online courses and workshops in order to help people become humane educators. And, we're advancing the field and growing the field. And a few years ago, we were finally ready to also sort of put that third leg of the stool into practice, which was delivering humane education directly to students. And how are we going to do that? And so a couple of years ago, we started the Solutionary program, and we are entering the third year of a 3-year pilot. And we are working directly with schools and with the teachers who are teaching those kids in middle school and high school in order to bring this program to students so that they can, within the context of their curriculum and with their teachers, they can identify a problem of concern to them. They can research thoroughly the systems that contribute to that problem and what's been done so far. They can work with mentors and experts in the community, devise a solution. If there's time in the amount of time that the teacher can allocate to this, then hopefully they'll even implement their solution and then present it. And so on June 1st this past year, we had our first regional solutionary summit where we had the students in the second year of the pilot who came together and they presented their solutions at the University of Southern Maine. And it was really exciting. And tomorrow we're going to be sharing the video from those students. And if people go to our website, humaneeducation.org, we're starting a big crowdfunding campaign for the program tomorrow. And we have this beautiful 2.5-minute video of these amazing kids.
Oh, I'm so excited that you shared that with our audience. Let them again know what the website is. We want to direct as much attention to supporting that as possible.
Thank you. It's humaneeducation.org.
Okay.
And you'll find loads of stuff there. We have you mentioned our award-winning resource center. It's free. I mean, we have hundreds of resources. Teachers and change agents are using these resources around the world.
It's very exciting and it's equally beautiful. I know that you're doing more than educating children. This really is, as you said, a strategy to help improve the world. And I want to draw some attention to your book, The World Becomes What We Teach, Educating Generations of Solutionaries. I am assuming that in the book, and I have not had the opportunity to read it yet, I've been chasing your TED Talks, that you really go into explaining why this is truly a revolutionary concept in how to get the youth excited and catch them before their senses are dulled down or the hopelessness or apathy sets in. What would you say in terms of adopting the ideas that what outcomes do you see would be the best, clearest way of defining how we can really be changing the world implementing your types of programs? And just kind of take it from maybe the first thing that's been the most obvious working with your students.
Well, in the book, and by the way, the book is really short. It's a 2-hour read, and it's very short on purpose. Teachers are really busy. Activists are really busy. I wanted to write a book for educators that was a little bit of a vision and a manifesto. This is what we need to do. So it's very, very accessible. And I write in the beginning of the book that there are 3 things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is we really need to embrace a bigger purpose for schooling than what we currently have in the United States. So right now, in the United States, the mission at the United States Department of Education is to prepare students for global competitiveness. And we hear that concept of, our students need to be able to compete in the global economy. I mean, we hear it all the time. We hear it from the media, we hear it from politicians, but it's actually the mission statement of the United States Department of Education. So when you realize that, what that suggests to me is that we have sold our kids short. That is not a big enough mission.
Absolutely.
For this generation of young people. I mean, given climate change and the potential loss of half of all species on Earth by the end of this century, and a growing population of over 7 billion people, almost 1 billion of whom don't have access to adequate food or clean water. We need a bigger purpose for schooling. And I believe it should be to educate a generation of solutionaries. I think that's the right mission. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to have a bigger goal, because we won't pursue any changes in education unless we have a different goal. So we need that different goal. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to make education real world and solutionary focused. So, all of us have been to school. Most of us have been to school, unless we were homeschooled. And we know that most of school is not really focused on real world issues. The math problems, the books that we read, if we're reading history, obviously we're reading about the past real world, very selective. But what about today? How can we make math in service of solving problems numerically that pertain to today's world? Solving problems related to, let me just give you an example. So we created a sample solutionary unit, which you can go to our website, humaneeducation.org, type in to the search bar solutionary unit, and we have a solutionary unit around this question. What do the primary causes of death of people in the United States have to do with the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico? Now, that's a heady question. It's confusing. What do those things have to do with each other? Well, a student who gets to do that unit gets to find out, and in the process, then work on solutions to both of those problems because they have the same causes. So here's another example. What if we had a guiding question for a multidisciplinary unit in school? And that question might be, how can we ensure that everybody has access to clean water? So in math, students could be studying how much water it takes to produce the various foods we eat and discover that some take a lot more water than others. In science, students might learn about what causes desertification or the depletion of aquifers, or where's all the fresh water gone, given that we live in a closed ecological system. In social studies, students could be exploring questions like, should everybody have access to clean water, and why is water being privatized, and what's happening in Flint, Michigan right now, or at the Standing Rock Reservation? Really real world pertinent issues. And then the students could work together to solve a water issue. So that's what I mean by real world and solutions focused. And then finally, the third thing that we need to do is we need to prepare students to educate solutionaries, because teachers are not, we need to prepare teachers. Teachers are not themselves, they have never been taught how to be a solutionary. They, in their training, aren't taught, how do I prepare my students to be solutionaries? So we need to do that. So all of those things we're addressing at the Institute for Humane Education, because to us, education is the root system that underlies all other systems. So if we want to be able to transform our energy system and our transportation system and our agricultural system and our production system and all these various systems, our criminal justice system, if we want to be able to transform them, we need to understand that the system that underlies everything is education. And until we have solutionaries who have been educated to think in this way, it will be harder to solve all of these problems and create more just and sustainable and healthy systems.
Oh, unquestionably. Unquestionably. And you really hit on an underlying issue. If the charter for our education system starts off from a very competitive concept of duality, we really aren't working in a sustainable model. And there's so much discussion about what is sustainable. We know that every topic that you have touched on has demonstrated that it isn't sustainable. It hasn't been managed well. It is polluting, the world. It's not enough for the right people. We haven't gotten a really good handle on what is available in given geography, so it's not a one size fit all. But equally, we have to be looking at the globe as a home for everyone and everyone's needs needing to be met, or sooner or later, it's not only not sustainable, it can't graduate to being the regenerative concept that your solutionaries are really aiming for.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to know how these educators that can get more information and learn about either your online course or coming to your university, how would you best direct them? Because we want to make sure that the educators that are passionate about delivering solutionary concepts and being able to do the best that they can, given the limitations of what they're allowed as educators in their various public or privatized systems, how can they go about getting involved directly with you and with your people?
So again, go to our website, humaneeducation.org, immediately get on our mailing list. and then you'll get our e-news. We never sell or trade our mailing list, so it won't get you spam from somewhere else. And so then you can look on our website's really well organized. You can find our online courses and workshops and the solutionary program. You can find information. That solutionary program, as I said, we are going into the third year of a 3-year pilot. So a year from now, we will be providing this program to a much wider audience. We have been testing it, refining it, working with public school teachers, and the solutionary program is simpler to incorporate into a private school, or into an after school program, or something that isn't as rigid as the standard public school curriculum, which is why we have been testing it and working with public school teachers who are incorporating the solutionary program right into their middle school and high school curricula.
Okay.
Because if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. So for teachers who are listening, we want to make this work for you. We know what's on your plate, and God bless you. You know, I remember many years ago, when I was in college, I was dating a medical student, and he said to me one day that he thought that being a physician was the most noble profession. And I remember feeling irritated when he said it, for two reasons. One, I had gone to college pre-med and I'd abandoned that path. So was I no longer abandoning the path of the most noble profession? And the other reason why it irritated me is I thought it was sort of silly. You know, I mean, who rates professions based on their nobility? It just seems, you know, unnecessarily competitive, if you will. But years later, I found myself reflecting on that. I mean, it stuck with me. And I realized that if I were forced to choose a profession based on nobility, and say the one that I thought was the most noble, I would probably say teaching. And the reason is because there is no other profession that holds the future in its hands. You know, is this future going to be regenerative and healthy and just and peaceful? Well, the answer to that lies more with teachers than any other professionals. And so, you know, I bring that up just to say that I have tremendous admiration for teachers, and we don't want our solutionary program or these concepts or ideas to be one more add-on, one more thing teachers have to do, one more burdensome requirement. Not at all. The whole idea of this is to enliven your curriculum, enliven your own you know, sense of your calling to be a teacher. Because when you get to do this work, and the teachers who have been working with us in the pilot, they are finding it incredibly exciting to have their students be so engaged, so enthusiastic, and you know, it feeds on itself. And so we want to work with teachers, and we are working with teachers in the development of a guidebook and webinars and professional development summer institutes, online courses. So all of that's being developed now for next year. So you can find out about it on our website, but wait 1 year and it will be available to more and more teachers. And, you know, if people are interested in our graduate program, we have 3 entry points for the 3 semesters of the year, and just go online and read about it. It's pretty exciting. People describe when they find our graduate program, they say, I can't believe this exists. You know, that they get to study the interconnections between social justice and the environment and animal protection and culture and change making in the context of teaching about these issues to other people. And that's really exciting.
Oh, well, that's what you've done. You've liberated the educator to bring their moral prerogatives and their sense of internal personal passions that maybe had been scripted out of academia, and you let them show up more fully as themselves. And I think that has to reignite for them what drove them to be educators to begin with, right? You let them really show up more fully as themselves. We know we have these problems in corporate. We know we have these problems in other areas of economy and industry. Teachers should be able to come with a full voice and be able to get as excited and as passionate about the topics that they know that their youth, that they have such a huge responsibility and such a big sway over. to really be able to give them a lot of dimensionality to their education. And I would like for, if you would, to indulge our listeners in one of your TED Talks. You talk to a group of students, and I'm not going to tell the story, I really want you to, about what is the actual or the real cost, to fix my terms for me, Zoe, of a t-shirt that you're holding up that I think was bought at one of those big box superstores, and how you engage them in understanding how that was created from start to finish with the seed and the cotton all the way through. I want people to get a feel for what your educators are going to have the opportunity to do in terms of really turning the lights on for students. Tell us a little bit about that story. It's a good one.
Sure. So the activity is called True Price. And again, it's available on our website, free and downloadable. So if you go to our website, type in True Price. And in True Price, you can take any object. In the TEDx talk that I gave, I used a t-shirt. And but you can do any object. It could be a food item, it could be bottled water, it could be an electronic device. And then you ask some questions about that object. So, what are the effects of this item on people, on other species, on animals, and on the environment, both positive and negative? What are the, so just, doing some research to ascertain that. And the next question is, what are the systems that perpetuate this product? And then what would an alternative be that does more good and less harm? And then finally, if there isn't an alternative, because sometimes there isn't, like for example, if you're looking at a cell phone and you're thinking what could be an alternative that does more good and less harm, but you still need a cell phone, there are not a lot of great electronic devices that don't have toxic chemicals in the process of producing them, that are produced in ways that are really truly fair trade, and that are built to last and don't wind up in a landfill, in a couple of years. So we don't have great alternatives for that. But we do have a great alternative for, certain clothing, or a fast food cheeseburger. We have a great alternative for that does more good and less harm. So when we don't have alternatives, we can ask what systems would need to change. And so True Price is this really powerful activity for examining our everyday choices. And it could seem, well, like that's a lot of work to, look at my choices and examine everything I use and eat and wear and do. But the thing about going on this journey is it's really interesting. So if you were to take, your, just an article of clothing, and you were to look at the label to discover information about it, you're not going to find out very much. You're going to find out what it's made of, how to launder it, and where it was produced. So you have to dig pretty deep. And then you have to, really research, okay, if it's made out of cotton, what is the cotton industry like? If it's made out of, some sort of rayon, what is that industry like? And so you dive into the internet and you learn so much. And in that process of learning, you are able to make choices that you didn't have before, because now you can make choices based on information. So, it's pretty powerful. I have been, I'm always evolving the activities that I do, and I've been evolving the True Price activity to lead more towards solutionary thinking. And so now the way I sometimes do this activity that's different is I make the activity problem based. So it could be the problem of cruelty in animal agriculture, for example. Rather than taking the fast food cheeseburger, I could say we have a problem of cruelty in animal agriculture. And then I'll put that problem as a statement on maybe a whiteboard and invite people to tell me what are the systems that contribute to that problem. And then we write the systems down around it. And, the system would, that would include our economic system and our media and advertising system and our educational system and our healthcare system and our political system and the farm bill and our transportation and energy system and our subsidies for all of these. We subsidize the cheeseburger to such a degree that instead of costing $20, if we had to actually pay for everything involved in it, It costs 99 cents. You can barely get an organic apple off a tree for 99 cents. How is that possible?
So true. Right.
Fascinating questions arise. And then when you get all these systems, you get subsystems like the subsidies under our political system and our energy system. And then you start making connections. So when I ask students, okay, which one of these systems is connected to another system? And somebody will say, well, our economic system is connected to our political system. And somebody else will say, well, our healthcare system is connected to our education system. And somebody will say, oh, well, our media system is connected to our economic system. And suddenly somebody in the room will say, they're all connected, which is
Yes.
always true. And
Yes.
so then the next question becomes, who who benefits from cruelty in our agricultural system? Who benefits from that? So we ask that. You have to know who benefits, because if you're not thinking about who benefits, when you come up with your solution, you don't want to be fighting somebody. You want to make sure people still benefit. So, and who is harmed? So obviously the animals are harmed, but we find out that the environment is harmed. We find out that people's health is harmed. There's so many harms. And so the next question, and this is where we really have to spend a lot of time, is what are the leverage points? What are the systems where there are leverage points, where if we made a shift here, it could have cascading effects in all these other systems? And then ultimately, when you've done this work, and this isn't work that you do in a 45-minute activity, but the activity can get you thinking in this way to go on that journey, then you can devise a solution.
Wow.
And so that becoming a solutionary is also on our website, humaneeducation.org, in the resource center. And you can find both True Price and you can find Becoming a Solutionary and many others.
What a liberating way of educating these youth, because again, I'm a child of the 80s, and I remember the public school and the private school, and things were very segregated, weren't they, Zoe? They were separated. Our math would go on for an hour, the bell would ring, and nothing that correlated the math we'd just learned would bridge us to the next history lesson. And then the bell would ring and we would move over into physical science. And it created a very big discontinuity of thought, very often, with to the peril of students that maybe can't bridge as quickly. And what you've done, both in the education system as well as the world that they're about to inherit, is show them that everything is interrelated. There's nothing that we can do that touches one life that is part of clothing, feeding, taking care of medical care industry that doesn't have effect on someone else. And then we move into not having necessarily to fix everything right away, but to see that it should be regenerative, and the moral fortitude is immediately there to say, this will even come back to me. It even helps the selfish thinkers. Sooner or later, this will have an impact on how I need to care for those that can't get the jobs because of the way that the institutions are set up, or that the food is not going to be as healthy for my body. But it shows that there is no away and there is no separate. There really is nothing but a oneness principle in how we are operating at every level. It's so exciting. And now I know why your students have, or at least one student has said they've gone on to educate their parents, who clearly could be, enlightened by this type of thinking, which might have led to a great story I'd love for you to chat with our listeners about, our viewers, about superhero Mogo Girl. I thought this was such a cool idea, because you're not only getting them to think outside the box, you're demonstrating that they actually have more power and can take on a mantle of being more than what they thought they were. Tell us a little bit about Mogo Girl.
Sure. Well, before I do, I just want to say about this this one letter I got from a student. So I taught a week-long humane education course in an 8th grade class just in the mornings, and I got letters after and thanking me for coming. And this one girl had written that it was the most inspiring week of her life, and she was teaching her parents, which was great. But it was also incredibly depressing, because, spending a week with me should not be the most inspiring week of any teenager's life, right? Every week in school should be inspiring. That's the point. And so just to loop back to what you were just talking about, this kind of education is a win-win-win. It's a win for kids, it's a win for schools and teachers, and it's a win for the world. I mean, what could be better? And, these kids who are educated in this way, even if they were only thinking selfishly, they are going to be in demand by colleges and employers, because colleges and employers want solutionaries. They want people with real world accomplishments. Okay, now I'll get to Mogo Girl. So I wrote this book called Most Good, Least Harm, and which is the principle that I try to live by. How can we do the most good and the least harm to ourselves, to other people, to animals, and to the environment? And that's a mouthful. So I condensed that to MOGO, MOGO being short for most good. And a number of years ago, one of the teachers who came to our summer institute, where all the participants have to give a presentation to their peers, he did his presentation on using superheroes in education to inspire kids. And so he said that he wanted us to imagine what superhero we would be. And so he was actually pretending that we were his students, and he was testing out this activity to inspire students to be superheroes. So he prefaced the whole thing by saying that he imagined me as Mogo Girl, because I'd written the book Most Good, Least Harm, and I talk about this principle. And so I ended up, well, it was pretty fun to have that concept of Mogo Girl. And I ended up using that idea to create a one-woman show that was sort of bringing humane education to the general public through humor. And so the show is called My Ongoing Problems with Kindness, Confessions of Mogo Girl. And all about, as Mogo Girl, the goal is, the superhero Mogo Girl would enable anybody to access their compassion and live accordingly instantaneously, and to see the effects of their choices and make humane and sustainable and restorative choices immediately. So, that would be Mogo Girl's superpower. And so, I'm no Mogo Girl in reality, but I do play one in my one woman show.
No, I'm hearing Mogo Girl, and I think her magic power is to instill imagination. I've heard you mention imagination so many times. And in an era where education has been teaching to the test, I know that's true in the state that I'm in. There's honor schools of excellence, and there's a lot of pride once our educators are working within schools that have high numbers and high designation. But they're not always being able to teach in a way that allows them to feel as fulfilled at the end of the day, because they're not getting those letters or those commentaries from their students. I got to go home and tell my parents this. This was the most inspirational week of my life. We've got to keep those numbers. And when you give your students and you give your educators the power to create imagination again, we are now at a point where there's an awakening. What we think and what we feel, so much of our evolving science has gotten really clear that what we think and what we feel is a field. And when you get a lot of enthusiastic, awakening youth into a room or into a symposium or into an activity where their imagination is alive and awake and zesty, you have an exponential effect on what can be created. So giving them their power back by giving them back their imagination is beyond just educating. You're really actually empowering their evolution, aren't you, Zoe?
I hope so. And it's really it's an alchemy. It's an when we think about what comprises, the a solutionary's thinking capacities or habits of heart, they are able to investigate and seek to solve problems that they care about. So that's the first step. And then we invite them to be really good critical thinkers and researchers, so that they can ascertain truth and determine what's factual and what's not, which, as we know, is so critical right now.
Yes.
And then to become great strategists and systems thinkers, as I've described, with the leveraging and the thinking about systems, but then ultimately to use their creativity to come up with a solution, which is the imaginative part. Yeah. And one thing that I invite students often to do is to think about how they would answer a couple of questions. What is it, what problems in the world are they most concerned about solving?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that they love to do? What are they good at? When they're young, they don't know yet all the things that they're good at, but I invite them to think about what they're good at in a very broad way. So not just like, am I good at math or science or writing or um, you know uh, sports, but am I a good listener?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a good artist? Am I good at paying attention to details and to nature? Am I good at communicating with people in a way that's positive
Mm-hmm.
and diplomatic? There are all these different skills that we have, these things we're good at. So then when we put those things together, what I'm good at, what I love to do, and what I care about, and we find that sweet spot where the answers to those questions meet, well, then we're on the road to our life's work.
Exactly.
And that,
And better than a Myers-Briggs any day of the week. You
yeah,
actually you empowered them to be authentic for what their passions are in the moment they're in, rather than sometimes the education that they might have started with. We have so many college students, as you know, Zoe, that start off with one particular trajectory for a major, and then what happens? They find that whatever's going on in society, whatever's going on in various industries that may, be titrating out of needing their particular skill sets, that they need to change focus. And so keeping that fresh and relevant keeps them very much mindful of where their current passions, where their energy's flowing, and where they're going to have the most fulfillment as an insertion point.
yep.
Where did your passion come from? I know we're kind of wrapping up on the hour. You have got such really contagious enthusiasm. There must have been a pivotal time when you realized the way it's working, the way I perceive it through this adult vision is not a future I am interested in. Your view of sitting on that park bench motivated you to think differently about the future that you wanted to create. What was that key moment for you, Zoe?
I wouldn't say that there was one key moment, but there was. Well, I mentioned that I went to college pre-med, and I went on quite a circuitous journey before I landed where I am as a humane educator. And I went to law school. I dropped out. I got a master's in English literature. I ended up going to divinity school to study world religions. And it was when I was in divinity school and I was looking for a summer job in Philadelphia, where my then boyfriend, now husband, was. And I found this program that was offered at the University of Pennsylvania that was offering week-long courses to middle school students. So, given this circuitous background, I had a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things. So I pitched a whole bunch of courses, and the director said yes to them. And one of them, well, three of them ran. That she must have been saying yes to a lot of people, because there were 60 courses offered that summer, and there weren't nearly enough kids to fill them.
Mm-hmm.
So three of my courses ran, and one was environmental issues, one was creative writing, and one was animal issues. And the animal issues course was the second most popular of the 60 that were offered that summer. And if you're curious about what was number one, it was robotics. And I'm a big Star Trek fan, so that was okay with me.
Me too.
But the animal issues course was really popular. And so what happened in that course is I had these students from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and they came in on Monday as a group of seventh and eighth graders, and by Friday they were different. And that transformation for one student happened literally overnight. So in the middle of the week, I talked about product testing on animals, in which everything from soap and oven cleaner and makeup is squeezed into the eyes of conscious rabbits, force fed to animals in quantities that kill, smeared onto their abraded skin. And he went home that night and he made his own homemade leaflets. And he came back to class the next day and he wanted to hand them out, not to his classmates, but on the street. So while the rest of us were having lunch, he was standing out on a Philadelphia street corner handing out his leaflets. He'd become an activist
Mm-hmm.
overnight.
Wow.
That week-long course, it changed my life. I realized I can do this. I can be an educator who teaches about real world ethical issues that are important.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of years ago, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago now, I was invited to speak at an event with Jane Goodall in New York City, which
Mm-hmm.
was a pretty big honor.
Pretty
And
profound, yes.
oh, it's pretty great. And one of the students in that first course I taught on animal issues, when he was 12 years old, he had gone on to work for the mayor of New York on HIV/AIDS issues, and he still does. So I knew he lived in New York City, and I hadn't seen him in 18 years. You know, it had been a long time since I'd seen him. We'd stayed in touch, but we hadn't seen each other. So I invited him to come to this event with Jane Goodall and myself, and he did. And after it was over, I was introducing him as David, who was in the first course I ever taught. And before I could even finish my sentence about him being in that first course, he interjected, "That course changed my life."
Mm. Wow.
So it changed his life and it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I discovered, all the ways in which I was perceiving myself as a dilettante. They had just gotten me to this point. The field didn't really exist. Humane education as a concept existed. It was taught mostly by humane societies and mostly around pet care
Mm-hmm.
and responsible, dog and cat ownership. That's really what humane education was all about for many decades. And so when I embraced this term humane education, it was with the understanding that this humane education, and the word humane literally means having what are considered the best qualities of human beings. So
Mm-hmm.
when you put those two things together and you think, well, humane education is education about people learning to identify and embrace and live according to the best qualities of human beings as they define that,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty powerful stuff. And that goes far beyond dogs and cats. It includes all species,
Mm-hmm.
human and non human, and this beautiful planet we call home.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the beginning of my journey to being a comprehensive humane educator, which I am today.
Wow, that was tremendous. And it was obviously, again, not one significant point, but several that interlaid and really built a bridge and a mosaic for you to say, there's no place where I can't plug in. I think that what is the most exciting and inspiring for our listeners is to realize that where you think you may go with something like this, an internal passion could have such a springboard effect into empowering so many different aspects of other people's lives, their education, how they serve in the world. It really is a win-win-win, isn't it, Zoe?
It is.
What's next for Solutionaries? We know that this is going to encourage activism, and we're good about activism. Again, nonviolent. You mentioned, Gandhi in one of your TED Talks, and talking about doing our best to be a solutionary where we are in a way that doesn't create more tumultuous agitation, but really reaches others and draws in their cooperation. Just in closing, tell our listeners how to manage that delicate bridge between being an activist and being aware and being educated and having maybe some righteous indignation, but knowing how to insert it in a solutionary way. Do you have some wisdom for them?
I hope so. I actually just had a blog post posted today at humaneeducation.org about, in these difficult times as we are living in, and in these very polarized times, and these times when we're fighting each other, and it's so painful. I mean, the rise of neo-Nazis, or at least the rising visibility of neo-Nazis and white supremacists. I mean, it's so painful. So how can we be strategic and positive in our change making? It's so important that we find ways to vent
Mm-hmm.
in the privacy of our homes with our close friends and family. We may need to find that way to vent, to say what we want to say in the strongest and, sometimes most painful terms. But when we are going out into the world, we it it is so important that we remember to always be strategic. Is what I'm going to do here going to do the most good and the least harm?
Mm.
Is it going to advance the vision that I have for
Mm-hmm.
a better world, a just world, a peaceful world, a healthy world, a humane world? And if it's not, then we need to change things up to make sure that our strategy is really aligned with that. And how we do that is we find some sort of practice for ourselves, whether it's meditation or it's prayer or it's art or it's going out in nature. I mean, I do those things. I meditate, I go out into nature, I do art, and those are the things that bring me home so that I can be a joyful person. If we are not if we're not joyful people, and I'll end with this, why would anybody want to join our club? People generally don't want to join a club of miserable, angry, depressed, despairing people.
True.
They want to join a club with people who are healthy, who are joyful, who are empowered, and who are making a positive difference. How to be that person? It's up to each of us, but you'll, again, find lots of resources, even for that, at our website, humaneeducation.org.
Well, you have brought so much hope to our listeners. You've definitely ended on such a high note. I don't know how anyone could want to not be part of your club, Zoe. And I want to thank you for being here, for helping to coin the term solutionary and really be part of this unfolding of opportunity for youth to change the world that we're in. And for all those that did not know that there were opportunities there, they really are. I hope that you go and take a look at Zoe's website. I hope you take a look at the programs that she has. And remember, you are the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.